During its first few years, the colony of New South Wales experienced dire food shortages as supplies failed to arrive from Britain and crops were poor. Until the early 1800s, free settlers were greatly outnumbered by transportees, either still as convicts or with tickets of leave. Slavery was not abolished in Britain until 1807. Sir John Caesar, who may have been born in Madagascar, was a slave in England when transported for theft in 1787. Of uncertain parentage and known as Black Caesar, he may have become the first Australian bushranger. After his first escape in Sydney, he was speared while trying to steal from natives and returned to camp. He continued to escape frequently while in Sydney and Norfolk Island, where, to help feed the Sydney settlement, a colony had been established for the more incorrigible. He married there and fathered a daughter, but later returned to Sydney. After his last escape in 1795, he led a gang of escapees marauding in the Port Jackson area until a reward of 5 gallons of rum, which was almost a form of currency then, was offered for his capture, and he was shot to later die. In the 1820s, on the western plains of New South Wales, convict Ralph Entwistle had accrued a personal army of over 50 by raiding farms and forcefully liberating assigned convicts to join his band that became known as the Ribbon Gang. While assigned near Bathurst, after receiving 50 lashes for a trivial matter, he went on the run, at times hiding in Abercrombie Caves, when not fighting fierce gun battles with vigilante posses, mounted police and soldiers. In 1830, in what became known as the Bathurst Rebellion, he and 9 of his men were captured, tried and publicly hanged in what is now Ribbon Gang Lane, Bathurst. Their bodies were left on display for a day. Irishman Jack Donohoe was transported to New South Wales in 1825 and twice received 50 lashes. 2 years later, after being assigned to work on a farm near Quakers Hill, he escaped and took up highway robbery, was captured and sentenced, but escaped on his way to the gallows. After returning to bushranging, at 24, he was fatally shot by a trooper in 1830. Bold Jack Donohoe, a ballad about his exploits, became a template for many bushranging songs. The 1850s discovery of gold drew tens of thousands to Australia and offered new opportunities for bushrangers. Some of the most daring were Frank Gardner and Ben Hall, along with their gang, who committed many robberies in the 1860s, including Australia's largest ever gold heist in 1862 at Escort Rock just north of Eugowra, where 2 police were wounded. It was the inspiration for the painting Bailed Up by Tom Roberts, although the scene for that was actually staged near Inverell. Their haul of cash and gold would be worth over $12 million today, but much of the gold was later recovered as it proved too heavy for them to transport. Before teaming with Hall to rob bullock wagons near Forbes, Gardner had escaped after being imprisoned in Melbourne for horse stealing. Hall was later recognised and brought to trial in Orange in 1862, but unexpectedly was acquitted. Robbery had been a sideline for Hall, and he returned home to find his cattle dead, starved in the yards, and his house burnt down. The gang went on to commit the Escort Rock robbery in June 1862, and later to be involved in many more robberies and shootouts with police, with deaths on both sides. Gardner later opened a small shop near Rockhampton, but was eventually arrested and sentenced to 32 years. In 1874, he was released and exiled to the United States, where he may have married a rich widow and died around 1882. Ben Hall also committed over 100 robberies with his own gang, including holding the entire town of Canowindra hostage for 3 days. Following a raid on Bathurst in 1863, Hall and his gang stopped at the Hen and Chicken Inn in Perthville, but departed minutes before pursuing police arrived. The site might now be as infamous as Glenrowan, but for that 10-minute gap. He was involved in a shootout at the now-defunct Coorawatha pub in 1864. After money induced a former friend to inform, Hall met his end at a hideout near a billabong north of Forbes, where he was shot over 30 times by police. He died soon after crying, "I am wounded, shoot me dead," and is buried in Forbes. Another member of the Garden Hall gang was Canadian-born John Gilbert, whose family had been lured to the Australian goldfields. He would later favour the no-dig method of obtaining gold and achieved notoriety as well. After the Ugara robbery, he laid low in New Zealand for a time, but on his return linked up with Ben Hall again and was involved in most of Hall's bushranging. Barely a week after Hall's death, Gilbert was shot dead after shooting 2 police near Bennelong and is buried nearby. There are probably dozens of plaques around southern New South Wales marking Hall and Gilbert incidents. In 1863, the Mudgee Mail was robbed near Bowenfields. As an indication of the hardships of travel then, passengers were out of the coach walking up a steep hill at the time. However, Hall was then operating in the Lachlan area, so authorities realised another gang must be responsible. Freeborn Fred Lowry, who had been a member of the Garden Hall gang and escaped Bathurst Jail, was thought to be responsible, along with John Foley and Larry Cummins. 2 months previously, they had held up a coach near Goulburn. Lowry was shot while being arrested and later died. "Tell 'em I died game" are often attributed as his last words. His accomplices were jailed. Shootouts had become so common that in 1865 a law was passed in New South Wales allowing anyone to shoot outboard bushrangers, resulting in a decline in incidents. A number of bushrangers operated under quirky names. Among those who thought they deserved the title captain were Captain Thunderbolt, who was born Fred Ward and operated over northern New South Wales for 6 years during the 1850s and 60s, robbing banks and mail coaches, including the Warrielder Mail on 4 different occasions. For most of the time, he maintained a relationship with a Wirramai woman, Mary Ann Bugg, having 3 children with her. She was an educated, expert horsewoman and taught the illiterate Ward to read. Bugg often accompanied him and after his capture probably helped him make a daring escape from Cockatoo Island Jail. A man was arrested and tried at Ipswich in Queensland in 1870, but was discharged when no witness could identify him with certainty as Thunderbolt. Ward used a number of hideouts in the New England area. He was shot by police in 1870 inside of the rock beside the New England highway that bears his name and is buried at Uralla. Mary Ann lived into her 70s. There's some confusion between 2 captain starlights. One, Frank Pearson, born in 1837, began bushranging in 1868 and died in 1899. He might be described as a conman who used many aliases and ranged across 3 states before being arrested at Mount Gundabooka, near Bourke, after fatally wounding a trooper near Engonia. Found guilty at his trial in 1869, he was sentenced to death, but the sentence was later commuted to life imprisonment, and he was released in 1884. Next arrested in Queensland, he served time on St Helena Island. After release, he was arrested and jailed in Toowoomba for passing worthless cheques in Thargomindah. He died in Western Australia in 1889 after accidentally ingesting cyanide. Another, fictional Captain Starlight, appears in Rolf Boulderwood's Robbery Under Arms, with his character moulded on a number of bushrangers, including Henry or Harry Redford, born in 1841 near Mudgee. Redford never called himself Captain Starlight, but is recognised for an incredible feat of bushmanship. Down Station was established northeast of Longreach in 1862, and 8 years later, Redford and some associates stole about 1,000 head of cattle from a remote area of the station to sell them without their brands being recognised. Over 3 months, they drove them through the Strzelecki Desert to north of the Flinders Ranges, less than 10 years after Burke and Wills had died during exploration of the area. A distinctive white bull led to their arrest, but when tried in Roma Court, the jury was so impressed by the feat they found Redford not guilty. He later served 18 months for horse stealing, then went on to complete a number of other impressive drives and manage cattle stations. He drowned while trying to cross the swollen Corella Creek in the Northern Territory in 1901, the year the separate colonies federated to form Australia. Andrew Scott, an educated man, left Ireland at 19 to seek gold in New Zealand, but soon signed up as an officer fighting in an internal war there. After being badly wounded, he eventually became a lay preacher at Mount Egerton in Victoria. In 1869, his local bank manager was found tied up and robbed, with a note implicating that manager, and signed Captain Moonlight. Scott decamped to later be jailed in Sydney after passing a worthless cheque. After release, he was held in Ballarat jail, awaiting trial for the bank robbery, but escaped by cutting a hole in the wall and liberating 5 others as well. Whether fairly or not, various crimes became linked to the name Captain Moonlight. Along the way, he teamed with the younger James Nesbitt, although the nature of their relationship is unclear. After a few more times in and out of jail, in 1879, he became involved in a battle with police at Wantabadgery Station near Wagga Wagga, during which James and a policeman were killed. He was captured, tried, hanged and buried in Darlinghurst Jail in 1880. Around 100 years later, he was reburied beside Nesbitt at Gundagai. Many aliases were used by a horse thief and murderer who did at least 3 stretches inside before escaping from Parramatta Jail in 1872, but he was often known as Captain Midnight. After killing a police sergeant, he met his end near Engonia in 1878, shot while trying to flee after being roused from his sleep by police, guided by a black tracker. When asked his name, he shouted, "Midnight is my name, and I will never tell. I have lived like a dog, and like a dog I'll die. What I've been all my life." He's buried nearby. Sarah Webb was possibly the first female bushranger on the mainland. She and her future husband, William, were transported separately in the early 1800s. With him in 1826, Sarah, dressed as a man, threatened a Mrs. Cottrell in her house with a musket, before they both vanished into the bush, taking clothing and other goods. Black trackers located them a few kilometres away and they were captured. Both were found guilty of a capital offence, but received Crown clemency. William pleaded for mercy for Sarah, and only he was sent to Norfolk Island for life. Mary Winter was transported to New South Wales, possibly after heading a London counterfeit ring. She was assigned to work for Robert Winter in the Nepean district, and they soon married. After they committed a robbery in 1826, Robert was sentenced to hang, but Mary was discharged. So, at 41, she became one of the few recorded female bushrangers after she joined Irishman John Tennant, an escaped assigned servant. He began bushranging in the Canberra district and often hid out on the mountain now bearing his name. She assisted his recovery after he was shot during an outstation raid, and may later have helped him bail up employees at a mill. Her life after 1828 is unknown. The man known as Sam Poo arrived from Singapore in the early 1860s to look for gold, but, having no luck, initially tried robbing Chinese miners of their finds before turning to bushranging around Gulgong, operating on foot. A black tracker located Poo 2 weeks after he fatally shot a policeman on his trail, and after 2 trials he was found guilty of intending to kill the black tracker and killing Trooper John Wood. He was hanged at Bathurst Jail in 1865. The Clark brothers, Thomas and John, grew up around Braidwood with little schooling, in surroundings that almost guaranteed their future career. During their 20s, their gang marauded through southern New South Wales goldfields, committing around 70 hold-ups. As Frank Gardner also used the alias Clark, there has been some confusion, but they were probably responsible for around 7 killings, including a number of police in execution style. In 1867, a reward of £5,000 was offered for the gang. A black tracker led a task force to their hideout near Gingera, and the gang surrendered after John Clark and a constable were wounded during a shootout. They were chained to a tree while awaiting transport to Sydney, where, despite various legal manoeuvres at their trial, they were hanged, aged 28 and 22. Blue Cap gained his name because he wore a protective covering for his eye inflammation. He had his first encounter with the law at 19 when he was acquitted of a shooting charge, but he was busy during the following year, being involved in a number of crimes through the Riverina, until captured in 1867. He pleaded guilty and received 10 years, but was released after serving 6.5. The story of Jimmy Governor, a part Aborigine married to a white girl, became the inspiration for the book and film The Chant of Jimmy Blacksmith, with some variation from actual events. His stockman father Tommy noticed silver ore, which led to the establishment of Mount Stewart Mine, but had received little compensation. Jimmy was schooled at Gulgong, then worked for a year at Cassillis as a black tracker. In 1900, incensed after his wife was taunted for marrying a black man, he committed a number of murders. This set him on the run with his brother Joe to be Australia's last proclaimed outlaws, and sparked the biggest manhunt in Australia, involving up to 2,000 police, troops and civilians for 14 weeks. A £1,000 reward was offered for each. Joe was shot dead and Jimmy captured to be later hanged at Darlinghurst Jail, despite various legal pleas. At the Bald Knob Hotel, near the remains of this old Cobb&Co station on the Guida Highway, in 1879 police shot 39-year-old Black Tommy McPherson dead. A local Aboriginal stockman and gold digger, he'd been bushranging while on the run since killing a man 2 years earlier. Irish-born John Lynch, also known as the Berrima axe murderer, was transported to Australia in 1832. Later, despite confessing to taking part in a murder, he was not convicted, but went on to bludgeon 10 people to death using a tomahawk. And, although he had felt protected by God, he was hanged at Berrima Jail in 1942, aged 29. During the 1920s, Jessie Hickman, a colourful female bushranger with many aliases, led a gang of cattle thieves operating around the area where the Wallamai pine was later discovered, at times sleeping in a cave nearby. Twice she was tried and acquitted of cattle theft, despite having twice previously been jailed for theft. She was Australian female Rough Rider champion in 1905 and 1906, and other credits include escaping custody from a moving train and stealing cattle held by police. She was possibly Australia's last bushranger, and at age 46 died of a brain tumour in 1936. When her body was not claimed, she was buried in an unmarked grave in Sandgate, Newcastle.